In 1943, a Marine on Guadalcanal traded his cigarettes, his watch, and half a day's pay for one can of peaches. That can is number 17 on this list. Most people picture Marines eating steak dinners under palm trees. The truth came out of a tin, cold, dented, and sometimes older than the men eating it. Number 14 was so foul that Marines named it something too filthy to say out loud. Number 3 became the ancestor of every energy bar sold in America today. Hit that subscribe button. Let's count down. Number 25, the reserve ration hardtack. Long before anything came in a friendly little tin, Marines carried the reserve ration, a holdover from the trenches of the First World War. At the center of it sat hardtack, a dense biscuit of flour and water baked until it was hard as a roofing tile. Men called it dog biscuit, tooth duller, and worse. It would not spoil in a sea bag for a year, which was the entire point. On Guadalcanal in 1942, when supply lines were thin and the fighting was thick, Marines gnawed these crackers cold or crumbled them into a canteen cup with instant coffee to soften them into gray paste. Some fried the crumbs in scavenged bacon grease and called it a meal. The taste was nothing, chalk and paste, but a couple of biscuits carried a man through a night on the line. The hardtack was never meant to be enjoyed. It was meant to keep a Marine alive until something better arrived. Usually it didn't. Number 24, meat and vegetable hash. When the C-ration replaced the old reserve chow, the meat can, the M unit, became the heart of every meal. One of the earliest was a meat and vegetable hash, a heavy scramble of chopped meat, dehydrated potato, and carrot packed tight in an olive drab can. Cold, it congealed into a solid brick you had to chip at with a spoon, the fat setting white and waxy across the top. Heated, it loosened into something almost like a diner hash, salty, greasy, and filling in the way only fat and starch can be. Marines learned fast that the trick was the fat. You stirred it back in as the can warmed over a heat tab, and the whole thing tasted twice as rich. A single can ran over 500 calories, engineered to fuel a man doing brutal labor. Nobody wrote home bragging about the hash. But on a cold morning in a wet foxhole, a warm can of it felt like the first decent thing that had happened in days. Number 23, canned white bread. Here's something most people don't know existed. For decades, the American military canned bread. A pale, slightly sweet loaf sat sealed inside a tin the size of a coffee can, shelf-stable for years, ready to be sliced the moment a Marine worked the lid off. It came out moist, a little spongy, faintly metallic, and to a man who had been eating crackers for a week, it tasted like a bakery. You could fry a slice in the grease from your meat can, or spread it with jam or peanut butter, and call it a sandwich. The bread was a small mercy engineered into the system because planners understood that men far from home needed one thing on the menu that reminded them of a kitchen table. It has vanished so completely that most Americans today have no idea their grandfather once opened bread with a can opener. But in a jungle or on a frozen ridge, that soft slice meant everything. Number 22, John Wayne crackers. Inside the bread and dessert can, the B unit, Marines found a stack of round, hard crackers that became legend. Nobody official called them John Wayne crackers, but every Marine did. They were dense, dry, and nearly indestructible, the kind of cracker you could stand on. Eaten plain, they sucked the moisture straight out of your mouth. But smeared with the processed cheese, topped with a jam, or crushed into a can of stew to thicken it, they turned into the workhorse of the whole ration. The nickname came from the movies. The story went that John Wayne had appeared in a training film opening a ration, and the name stuck to half the box. Some said the crackers were tough enough for John Wayne himself. Others swore the little folding can opener earned the name first. Either way, those round crackers were the thing a Marine reached for when he wanted to build a real meal out of scattered olive drab cans. Number 21, chopped ham and eggs. Breakfast in a can sounds like a good idea until you've had it cold at 4 in the morning. Chopped ham and eggs was exactly that. Cooked egg and bits of ham compressed into the meat can, meant to be a familiar breakfast for men who might not see a mess hall for weeks. Warmed over a heat tab, it was passable, the egg soft and the ham salty. Cold from the can, it was a rubbery yellow puck that men choked down because the sun wasn't up and the calories were the calories. Marines learned to doctor it. A little hot sauce from home, a crumbled cracker for texture, a spoon of the cheese stirred through. It was one of the more tolerable meat cans, which in the world of C-rations counted as high praise. For a man who grew up on farm eggs and his mother's skillet, it was a ghost of a breakfast. But it was breakfast, and out there, that mattered. Number 20, cocoa beverage powder. Tucked into the accessory pack was a small envelope of cocoa powder, and to a cold, exhausted Marine, it was worth more than the cigarettes. You tore it open, dumped it into your canteen cup, added water, heated over a heat tab or a chunk of burning fuel, and stirred until it turned into a thin, sweet, almost chalky hot chocolate. It never tasted like the cocoa your mother made on a snow day, and it fought you a little, going into the cup. But wrapped around a canteen cup in a freezing foxhole, that warmth traveled straight to the center of a man. On the frozen reservoirs of Korea, where rations froze solid inside their cans, a cup of hot cocoa was sometimes the only warm thing a Marine touched all day. It was sugar and heat and a 2-minute reminder that comfort still existed somewhere in the world. Small thing, huge thing. Number 19, pork slices cooked with juices. Of all the meat cans, the pork slices had a reputation. Thin, pale pieces of pork sat suspended in a layer of solidified fat and gelatin, cooked with juices, the label promised, which was a generous way to describe the cloudy aspect that greeted you when the lid came off cold. It was not pretty, left in the sun or warmed slowly, though. That fat melted back into the meat, and the whole thing became genuinely good. Tender pork you could pile onto a fried slice of the canned bread or eat straight with crackers. Marines who heated it right defended it. Marines who ate it cold on a rainy night never forgave it. This was the recurring truth of the C-ration. The difference between a meal a man remembered fondly and one he cursed for 50 years came down to whether he'd had 30 seconds and a heat source. Cold, it was survival. Hot, it was almost dinner. Number 18, beans and Frankfurter chunks. Beans and Franks, beanie weenies, to every Marine who ever pried the can open, were one of the most requested meals in the box, and that alone tells you how the rest of the menu tasted. Cut-up Frankfurter pieces sat in a can of beans and tomato sauce, and, heated over a fire, they came surprisingly close to something you'd eat at a ballpark. The tomato sauce gave it brightness the other cans lacked. The beans made it stick to your ribs through a long night. The little chunks of Frankfurter delivered just enough real meat texture to feel like a treat. Men traded for this one. In the barter economy of a Marine unit, where every man knew exactly which cans he wanted, beans and Franks held its value. A guy stuck with a case of ham and limas would give up almost anything to swing a trade for beanie weenies. It wasn't gourmet, but in a foxhole, it was close to joy. Number 17, canned fruit. This was the crown jewel of the entire C-ration, and every Marine knew it. Sealed in the fruit can, sometimes peaches, sometimes pears, sometimes fruit cocktail or apricots, was the one thing in the whole box that tasted like home and comfort and cold sweetness all at once. After days of salt and fat and gray meat, a can of peaches and heavy syrup was a religious experience. Men drank the syrup last, slowly, the way you'd sip something expensive. On Guadalcanal, on Peleliu, in the mud of Vietnam, a can of fruit was the most valuable item a Marine could hold. It got traded, gambled, hoarded, and stolen. Officers used it to reward men. Buddies split a single can to the last slice as a gesture of loyalty. That opening story, the Marine who traded his watch for peaches, wasn't an exaggeration. It happened constantly because in a world stripped down to olive drab and gunfire, a mouthful of cold fruit was a mouthful of the life a Marine was fighting to get back to. Number 16. Processed cheese spread. The little can of processed cheese was one of the quiet heroes of the ration. Thick, orange, and shelf-stable to the point of immortality, it did jobs no other item could. Spread on the John Wayne crackers, it turned a mouth-drying biscuit into a snack. Stirred into beans or noodles, it made a thin meal creamy. Melted over a fried slice of canned bread, it became something close to a grilled cheese in a war zone. Marines prized the cheese for its versatility and its fat, dense calories a working body burned through fast. Later versions came flavored with pimento or caraway, small variations men debated like wine. The cheese never spoiled, never froze solid the way the meat cans did, and never let you down. In a ration system full of gambles, it was the reliable one. Every Marine, decades later, could still describe the exact orange color of that little tin. First pattern break. Here's where the story stops being about food and starts being about a tiny piece of steel. None of these cans meant anything without a way to open them, and the answer was the P-38, a folding can opener barely an inch and a half long that a Marine wore on his dog tag chain and guarded like a religious relic. Marines called it the John Wayne, and a man who lost his was in real trouble. With a few practiced flicks of the thumb, that little blade walked around a lid in seconds. Then came the harder problem: heat. A cold C-ration was survival, a hot one was morale. Marines burned trioxin heat tabs, scraps of cardboard, even the ration's own waxed boxes to warm a can. And in Vietnam, they discovered that a pinch of C4 plastic explosive, lit in the open, burned hot and fast and boiled coffee in under a minute. It only exploded if you stamped on it. Mostly, they didn't stamp on it. Number 15. Spaghetti and meatballs. Somebody in a quartermaster kitchen decided Marines deserved Italian food, and so the ration menu grew a can of spaghetti and meatballs. It was a bold promise for a tin, and it delivered better than most. Soft noodles and small meatballs sat in a tomato sauce that, heated up, actually tasted like something an American kid recognized from a Sunday table. Compared to the gray meat cans, it was practically a restaurant meal. Marines doctored it the way they doctored everything: a stir of cheese to make the sauce creamy, a shake of hot sauce, a crushed cracker for body. It heated fast and evenly, which mattered when you had one heat tab and 30 seconds before you had to move. It wasn't as coveted as the fruit or the beanie weenies, but it never got cursed either. It sat in the comfortable middle of the hierarchy, the taste of home smuggled into a war in tomato sauce. Number 14. Ham and lima beans. Now the infamous one. Ham and lima beans earned a nickname so foul it can't be said on this channel, but every Marine from World War II through Vietnam knew it instantly and said it with pure venom. On paper it was reasonable: chunks of ham and pale lima beans in a light sauce. In the can, it was a disaster: cold. The beans turned to grainy paste, and the fat congealed into a slick gray film that turned stomachs. Even heated, the limas stayed mealy, and the whole thing carried a flavor men described as soap, chalk, and disappointment. This was the can nobody wanted, the one left at the bottom of the case after everything good got traded away. Getting stuck with ham and limas was a running punishment, a small, daily cruelty of military life. And yet the quartermasters kept packing it, war after war, because it was cheap and it kept. Marines ate it anyway, cursing every bite, because the alternative was an empty stomach and a long night ahead. Number 13. Canned pound cake. Not every surprise in the ration was a bad one. Buried in some B units was a small canned pound cake, dense, buttery, faintly sweet, and to a Marine who'd been eating salt and fat for a week, it was a slice of heaven in olive drab. It held together moist inside the sealed can for months, somehow tasting like something a mother might have pulled from an oven. Men rationed it, saving the pound cake for last like a reward, sometimes trading 2 lesser cans to get one. Later versions offered fruitcake or a cinnamon nut roll, and Marines argued over which dessert can was king. The pound cake usually won. There was something almost emotional about it. Proof that even in a system built for survival, somebody had bothered to include a real dessert. On a miserable night, a fork of pound cake and a cup of hot cocoa could turn a broken day around. It was the closest thing to a birthday a man got out there. Number 12. Peanut butter. The little can of peanut butter did double duty, and the second job is the one Marines never forgot. As food, it was thick, oily, and gluey enough to weld your jaw shut, but spread on crackers or the canned bread, it delivered a wall of calories and a taste of home in one sticky bite. Men mixed it with the jam to make a sandwich or with a little cocoa powder to fake a candy bar. But the legendary trick was using it as fuel. That peanut butter was so dense with oil that a scoop of it, lit with a match, would burn with a low, steady flame long enough to heat a canteen cup of coffee. Out of heat tabs and out of options, more than one Marine set fire to his breakfast to warm his drink. It's the kind of resourcefulness that only comes from men who have nothing but what's in the box. Food you could eat or food you could burn, the peanut butter was both. Second pattern break. Here's the part the recruiting posters never showed. When Marines weren't in the field, they ate in the mess hall, and the mess hall had its own legends, none more famous than SOS. Officially, it was creamed chipped beef on toast. Unofficially, every Marine called it something that started with the same letters and ended in on a shingle. Thin, salty, dried beef in a thick white gravy, ladled over toast, served by the vat to men filing through a chow line before dawn. It was cheap, fast, and filling, which is exactly why the military served it for 100 years. Marines mocked SOS endlessly, and they ate every bite. A cook who made it right, with real pepper and enough beef, earned quiet respect. A cook who made it wrong heard about it for a week. It was the taste of a base at 5 in the morning, of boots and coffee and the day ahead, and veterans still crave it. Number 11. Instant coffee. No item in the accessory pack mattered more than the flat envelope of instant coffee. Marines, like every fighting force before them, ran on caffeine, and the ration coffee, bitter, thin, and grainy, was the fuel that got men out of their holes in the morning. You shook the powder into your canteen cup, poured in water heated any way you could, and stirred up something that barely resembled a diner's coffee but did the job better than anything else on earth. In Korea, where the cold could kill, a hot cup was survival. In Vietnam, it was ritual. Men who barely knew each other bonded over a shared canteen cup at dawn. The coffee was weak and it was bad, and every Marine who drank it would give anything to have a cup again, because it wasn't really about the coffee. It was about the 2 minutes of warmth and quiet before the day turned into whatever it was going to be. Number 10. The D ration bar. This is the one that fooled everybody. The field ration D bar looked like a chocolate bar, a thick, dark block of Hershey's chocolate handed to a Marine as emergency food. But it was designed on purpose to taste only slightly better than a boiled potato. The reasoning was deliberate and a little cruel. If it tasted too good, hungry men would eat their emergency ration the moment they got it, and it was meant to be a last resort. So, Army planners and a Hershey chemist named Logan built a bar so dense and bitter and hard that you couldn't bite it. You had to shave it with a knife. One bar packed around 600 calories, enough to keep a man moving when everything else was gone. Marines carried them across the Pacific, hating them, grateful for them. Some crumbled the bar into hot water for a thick emergency cocoa. It was never a treat. It was a promise that no matter how bad things got, there were still 600 calories in your pack telling you to keep going. Number 9. Canned beef stew. The beef stew can was one of the most honest meals in the whole system. No clever name, no fancy promise, just chunks of beef, potato, and carrot in a brown gravy. Heated over a fire, it was genuinely good. A real stew that tasted like something a person had actually cooked. Cold, it was a can of gray lumps in cold gravy that a hungry Marine ate anyway. This was the can men used as a base. Dump in the cheese, crush in the crackers to thicken it. Stir in a second can to stretch it into a shared meal for two. The stew held a solid middle rank, more respected than the pork, less coveted than the beanie weenies. It was reliable, filling, and forgiving. On a cold night with a working heat source, a canteen cup of hot beef stew was as close to a home-cooked dinner as the field ever offered. Number 8, boned chicken and turkey loaf. Every so often the ration offered a taste of poultry, and Marines treated it like a small holiday. Boned chicken, shreds of real chicken packed in the can with a little broth, was mild, tender, and blessedly free of the heavy grease that coated most of the meat cans. It ate almost light. Stirred into rice or crushed crackers, it stretched into a comforting bowl that reminded men of a home kitchen more than anything else in the box. The turkey loaf, packed for holiday rotations, was the closest a Marine in the field got to Thanksgiving. A compressed slice of seasoned turkey that, with a smear of jam standing in for cranberry, could bring a homesick man close to tears. These cans were rare and prized. When a case turned up heavy with poultry, word spread fast and the trading got serious. In a diet built on ham, beans, and mystery meat, a mouthful of real chicken tasted like a letter from home. Number 7, jam and jelly. The small can of jam was one of those items that seemed minor until you understood how a Marine actually built a meal. Sweet, bright, and simple, apple, grape, mixed berry, the jam was the thing that turned survival into something almost pleasant. Spread on the John Wayne crackers, it made a passable cookie. Layered with peanut butter on canned bread, it became a sandwich that tasted like a school lunch and hit a homesick man right in the chest. Spooned over pound cake, it added a sweetness the ration desperately needed. Marines valued the jam far out of proportion to its size because in a world of salt and fat and gray meat, sweetness was scarce and precious. It kept forever, weighed almost nothing, and asked nothing of a tired man but the twist of a can opener. A spoon of grape jam on a cracker was the kind of small comfort that got a Marine through to morning. Third pattern break. Here's what changed everything when the war moved into the jungles of Vietnam. The old canned C-rations were heavy. A day's worth could weigh nearly 6 pounds, an anchor for men humping through triple canopy jungle for weeks at a time. For Marines and recon units patrolling deep behind the lines, that weight could get you killed. So the military built something new, the long-range patrol ration, freeze-dried and sealed in a foil pouch, weighing a fraction of the cans. You added water, waited a few minutes, and a handful of dry flakes bloomed into a hot meal. Men called them lerps, and they were revolutionary. For the first time, a Marine could carry days of food without carrying days of steel. Freeze-drying, the same technology that would later fill grocery shelves and feed astronauts, got its brutal field test on the backs of men slipping through the jungle. The future of field food had just been invented, and it was light enough to run with. Number 6, jungle ration extras. Before the freeze-dried lerps, the military had already been experimenting with lighter, tropical-tested food, and bits of that jungle ration philosophy fed Marines in the Pacific and beyond. The idea was simple. In brutal heat and humidity, heavy, greasy cans spoiled morale and appetite, so planners packed lighter items that held up in the tropics and didn't sit like a brick in a sweating man's stomach. Dehydrated components, tropical formulated chocolate, hard candies, and drink powders were built to survive jungle rot and roasting temperatures. Marines slogging through island heat favored the lighter items and the drink powders that replaced the salt they sweated out all day. Much of it has been forgotten entirely. But the jungle ration was where the military first admitted that a can of ham and limas built for a European winter made no sense in a Pacific swamp, and started building food around the place a Marine actually had to survive. Number 5. The LRP ration. The long-range patrol ration deserves its own place on this list because of what it meant to the men who carried it. For a recon Marine moving in a small team deep in enemy territory, everything came down to weight and silence. The LRP ration solved both. A foil pouch of freeze-dried chili, beef stew, spaghetti, or chicken and rice weighed almost nothing and made no clatter. You poured in water, hot if you had it, cold if you didn't, and let the flakes swell back into a real meal. Cold-soaked in a canteen over a few hours of patrol, it turned soft and edible without a wisp of smoke or smell of cooking to give a team's position away. Men who ran long patrols swore by them. The taste was decent, the calories solid, and the weight saved could mean the difference between keeping up and falling behind. The LRP ration was built for the hardest, most dangerous job in the war, and the men who ate them never forgot what they made possible. Number 4. Fried Spam. Meat, luncheon, canned pork. Luncheon meat, which every Marine on Earth simply called Spam, was so common through the Pacific War that men grew to hate it with a passion usually reserved for the enemy. It arrived by the trainload, cheap and shelf-stable and endless. Boiled, it was grim. But a Marine with a heat source and a little initiative learned the secret every islander already knew. You slice it thick and fry it until the edges caramelize and crisp. Fried Spam was a different animal entirely. Salty and browned and genuinely good on canned bread with a smear of mustard. Across the Pacific, from mess tents to island kitchens, fried Spam became a staple that outlasted the war by generations. Men who swore they never wanted to see another can found themselves, decades later, frying a slice on a Sunday morning and remembering. It was the meat that fed the Pacific, hated in the moment, oddly missed in memory, and still sizzling in kitchens across America today. Number 3. The Tropical Chocolate Bar. Here's the ingredient story modern companies are only now catching up to. The regular D-bar melted into brown soup in Pacific heat, so Hershey engineered a new one, the Tropical Chocolate Bar, reformulated to hold its shape at temperatures that turned ordinary chocolate to liquid. It could sit in a Marine's pack in jungle heat and stay solid, a small miracle of food science handed to men who needed both energy and a scrap of pleasure. Packed dense with sugar and calories, shelf-stable for the long haul, engineered to survive brutal conditions and deliver fast fuel to a working body. That should sound familiar. It's the exact pitch on every energy bar and protein bar sold in America today. The heat-stable, high-calorie, indestructible field chocolate the military built to keep Marines moving through the tropics was the direct ancestor of the $2 bar in every gym bag and glove box in the country. Marines were eating the original energy bar decades before anyone thought to sell it at a checkout counter for a premium. Number 2. SOS in the field. Creamed chipped beef earns a second look because it wasn't only a mess hall meal. Resourceful Marines rebuilt it in the field from whatever the ration gave them. The instinct was universal. A man with a can of chopped meat, a little of the processed cheese, some water, and crushed crackers to thicken. It could cobble together a rough gravy, pour it over a fried slice of canned bread, and produce a field version of the SOS he knew from base. It was ugly, it was improvised, and it tasted for a moment like the ordinary world he'd left behind. This was the deepest genius of the men who lived on these rations, not the food itself, but what they could build from it. A Marine with a P-38, a heat tab, and a handful of scattered cans became a short-order cook, engineering a real meal out of parts never meant to go together. SOS in the field was proof that you could take a man's kitchen away, but you couldn't take away the cook in him. Number 1. Beefsteak with potatoes and gravy. At the top of the list sits the can every Marine wanted, and few of them got beefsteak with potatoes and gravy. It was the crown of the meat cans, the closest thing to a real dinner the ration system ever produced. Slices of beef, chunks of potato, and a brown gravy that, heated properly over a fire, tasted like something a man's mother might have set on the table on a Sunday. When a Marine pulled this can from a case, the day got better. When he heated it right, closed his eyes, and took the first bite, he was, for just a moment, home. This was the meal traded for, gambled for, saved for the worst nights when a man needed something to remind him what he was fighting to get back to. It wasn't gourmet. It came from a dented tin older than some of the men eating it. But out there, in the mud and the cold and the noise, a hot can of beefsteak and gravy wasn't a ration. It was dignity. It was proof that somebody still thought a Marine deserved a real dinner. Here's my challenge. Pick one of these and try it this week. Fry a slice of Spam. Make SOS on toast the way your grandfather ate it before dawn. Open a can of peaches and eat it slow, the way a Marine on Guadalcanal would have. Then think about the men who lived on this stuff through 3 wars, out of a dented tin and a folding can opener. Drop the one you're trying in the comments, because these weren't just meals. They were how Marines survived long enough to come home.